Estamos aqui hoje, mais um webinar da Cornet Global Brasil. Hoje a gente tem Kristin Cerutti aqui conversando com a gente da Nelson. Ela é Senior Designer lá na Nelson. E eu vou agora fazer o switch to English. So, thank you, Kristin, to be with us. It's a pleasure. We discussed a lot about this webinar some days ago. The material looks like great, and the discussion I think will be amazing. A lot of knowledge for everyone that is interesting in design and office spaces. So, Kristin, this is your space. I put in mute, and you and Gustavo can lead this one. Okay? Have fun.
Thank you.
And welcome to Brazil. Nowadays, the only one to travel, right, is the wireless travel. So welcome to Brazil.
Thank you. Eu falo inglês, so I'm so sorry. I will be doing this all in English. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Like Renato said, I am Kristin Cerutti. I work for Nelson Worldwide, and I am based in our Chicago office, although we have offices all over the United States. I am a senior designer, and I have been working solely in commercial real estate in workplace design for the last 15 years. I've done projects all over the United States, and I've also done projects in Europe and in Dubai as well. So today we're going to talk a little bit about obviously what we're all dealing with right now with COVID and the pandemic, but more importantly, how that's affecting our employees and what that's going to mean for the office space and the workplace when people start returning to the office. So to start out, Nelson over the past couple months has done our own research, talking to employees about what it is that they're anxious about now and what they need for themselves as they start to go back. So as we go through this discussion, we're going to focus on 5 key points that we've seen come out of a lot of that data, as well as other data coming out from the industry. And in those 5 key points, you're going to see some very specific statistics listed. Those statistics are from our own research that we've done. And if you want any additional information on those, you can find that at our website. And that website's listed here on this slide. And it's also at the end of the presentation as well. And I'd be happy to enter that in the chat for you at the end. I want to give you just a little brief overview about the demographic breakdown of the survey that we did. It was of 2,000 people. All the people surveyed were within the United States. And we tried to survey, it was surveyed completely anonymously, but we did try to specifically reach out anonymously to make sure that we were covering a vast array of people so that we had a good representation. And that included both income levels, education levels, age, as well as you're going to see we were very careful to make sure that we covered a large size, a large grouping of different size companies, as well as making sure that we had people who were new to the company they were working for, as well as those that have been there for a long time, so that we had the biggest amount of data we could possibly get to kind of cover everyone. What you're seeing on this map is the darker the blue, the more people that were represented in that survey. So you'll see we tried to get a large chunk of people from all of the major areas of the United States, as well as to make sure that we got some in the central locations as well. And just so you know, as we do continue, the data that's represented is from July. I think that's important to say because obviously a lot of things have changed specifically in the US in the last couple of months. We do intend to continue to survey, but just know that the points noted in this presentation are from July. I did want to take a moment also before we tackle the 5 key points to talk a little bit about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I think this is something most of us are probably familiar with, but if you're not, this pyramid represents kind of the 5 key things that each person needs in order to feel fulfilled in their life, and where you are changes based on how you're feeling that day, that week, that month. But I want to point out that if you don't have your basic needs met, the 2 to 3 items at the bottom of that pyramid, you can't focus on anything that's further up on the pyramid. So the main reason to bring this up is just that when any major event like this pandemic happens, people kind of get stepped back down in this pyramid, and they are now more concerned about things like their personal safety, their security, the relationships that they have with their family, their friends, their coworkers. So until those needs are addressed, we can't get up to that top portion, which is what we normally focus on in the workplace, which is helping people achieve their full potential and making sure that they are most productive in the office. So I'm not saying your office space needs to solve for all of these things, but the office space can help aid in some of these. So I want you to just keep this in mind as we move through these 5 sections, because I think you'll see how data results came back, and you'll notice that those bottom 3 items continually are coming back as things that people are needing to have addressed in order to feel more safe and secure in the office space as well.
So, Kristin, as we talked earlier, do you think that these 2 sections, the base of the pyramid, do you think that that pyramid will change a little bit in terms of size, or the importance of those 2 items will go up in the future as we're starting to see like a second wave in Europe of contamination and people going back to their homes, the ones that were in the office? I just heard Lego's workplace global manager talking about it. And do you think that those items will go up instead of having, for example, STEAM needs on top, changing with psychological needs? How do you see that in the future?
So like I said, you tend to change where you are based on what's happening in your personal life. So should another wave happen, or we're saying these pandemics are probably not something that we will never see again. Even if we make it through this one and everything's fine a year from now, there's a very strong chance something similar could happen in the future. Anytime, a death in your family, anything significant that happens, you slowly start stepping back down. So I don't think the order that they happen in will change, but as you address each of those things, you slowly do start to move back up. So right now, where people tend to be is they're kind of in this orange and purple section right now, is they've been separated from their friends or family or colleagues for quite a while now. Some of us in the US, it's been 7 months since we've seen any of our colleagues. Some of us still don't feel safe leaving our houses, that we've got that unknown. So the longer you are kind of wanting these things, the more you tend to want them, which means until those are addressed, you can't focus on anything else. So the reason that I really wanted to point this out was, the office space before the pandemic, everyone was talking about is how do we make it most efficient? How do we make people most productive? Which is still very important for companies. However, if companies don't realize what people are coming back to the office with, these fears of their own safety, the fears that they might not see their colleagues again anytime soon, if those aren't addressed, people won't come back being their most productive and most efficient. So the more we can help as companies to support our staff coming back, knowing that they are coming back with these fears, I think we can get them to that top of the pyramid again faster, which is better for everyone. So the first section that I wanted to touch on is probably the most obvious, that we're all aware of. We're all have a much more heightened awareness of spaces, things around us, how close people are in proximity to us. But I wanted to point out a few things that maybe we don't know outright. And I would say the first one is related to cleanliness of space. Most of us in our office spaces previous to COVID would leave in the evening you assumed someone came in and cleaned your space while you were gone, and you came back in the morning and you were fine. You probably didn't think about it. Now where we're at, because people have kind of moved down, like I said, on that pyramid, we're kind of at a point where we've lost that trust. If people don't see it happening, they don't trust that it did happen. So as people start returning to the office, there will need to be a better focus on not just how thoroughly the space is cleaned, but when it's cleaned, and how do you notify people once it has been cleaned. I think something that hotel brands have been doing very well in the past few months is they've been putting those little stickers on the doors after they've cleaned the rooms to kind of notify you it's been cleaned and no one's entered since it's been cleaned. Something like that, just an indication to staff that this area has been disinfected, could go a long way to make people feel more comfortable. Another thing that we're seeing, you'll see in the data here that 83%, people are specifically calling out their concerns about HVAC systems. And I wanted to bring that up to everyone on this call because I'm sure we all realize that that's an extremely expensive item to address. But people are really apprehensive right now about the air that they're breathing and what's in the air that they're breathing. So something to just consider is talking to your landlord or to your building about potentially switching out filter systems or looking at UVC lighting being added to those systems. There is still a cost associated with that, but is definitely more accessible than a complete overhaul of an HVAC system. But even notifying your staff that you're even thinking about those things and you understand that it's a concern is going to help ease when people start coming back. And then the other thing I want to point out is people are going to still have personal items when they come back, and places where they can store them separately, but still securely is also going to be important. So whether that's a locker when they enter the space that they put their stuff in, or if they have their own secure space in their personal area, whether that's a desk or an office, just somewhere where they don't have to have their coats or bags commingling with others, is another small thing you can do to make your staff feel more comfortable. The next area I wanted to touch on was the idea of personal safety and communication around personal safety. People have we talked a little bit about that apprehension and a lack of confidence. So how we can kind of reinforce that is through communication and consistent communication. Even if you don't have an update on what's going on, telling your staff that you don't have an update actually goes a long way. I think a lot of people hesitate sometimes to communicate because they don't know if they have the exact answer yet. But even if you have to make a decision, communicate that and change your mind in 2 days and communicate that again. It shows that you're open and that there's a sense of transparency there, and that you're trusting your employees to share that information. And that's making people feel a sense of comfort that they aren't or weren't really feeling at the beginning of the pandemic when all of us didn't really know what was going on. Giving people that sense of control back is really important. So ways that you can do that, being very clear with your employees prior to them coming back to the office as to where areas like a sanitation station would be located within the space. If you're going to create a path of travel throughout the space so people only walk in one direction, making sure that they know that before they show up in the office. If you're going to require people wear masks in the office, making sure that that's very clear and noted before they arrive, just so that there aren't any surprises or people don't feel like they are unsure of what they're walking into when they arrive. Another thing is we're seeing, and there's a representation here of some of them that we've done on the screen, lots of signage to be able to help guide people once they do show up to the physical space. But I want to point out that how this signage is worded and how it looks is actually more important than you would think. If you imagine if instead of these little blue circles, it was red tape kind of in an X, or it just said, don't do this, or you have to wash your hands kind of with like a big red sign, that's just going to increase someone's anxiety level. So best you can try to focus on the more positive messages, focus on the things people can still do, the places they can still go. And it doesn't hurt to say a cute little message like, "You're looking great today," just to bring a smile to someone's face. It seems really small, but sometimes those small things can really change how somebody's feeling. If they just had a really stressful commute, it was their first time on public transit in a while, and they're feeling uncomfortable, sometimes those small things can make all the difference.
Kristin,
Yeah.
And did you have any feedbacks once you implemented this this first wave of coming back to the office with the signage and everything? Did you talk to your clients and had any feedbacks about the way the employees were receiving that message and receiving that information given back to the managers or the real estate people or the facilities manager? And if they say, "Hey, I'm really impressed and I'm feeling welcome and I'm feeling being cared about, that you are taking care of us."
Mm-hmm.
Did you receive any feedbacks and you talk to your client about it?
Yeah, so actually one of our clients that went back, they've been back for a couple months now. They implemented signage that was actually an image from their space. In addition to doing that, they took their administrative staff who had, when everyone got sent home and everyone was working at home on their own computers, I think most of us, our administrative staff, didn't have as much to do as they were doing previously. They weren't having to mail letters out for us or box packages because we were all at home. So what I thought was really creative is they took their administrative staff and almost turned them into concierge for the rest of their employees. So what they did is if they knew an employee, and this was before they all came back to the office even, if they knew a specific employee was planning on coming into the office that day or that week, they created their own little package that they would email to them before they arrived saying, "We know that you're coming. We're excited to see you. We've missed you. Here are the areas that we've changed in the space. So when you enter, this is where we would like you to go. We will take you to the space that you'll be working during the day. We can pre-order you lunch. Here's the information on what, if you'd like something specific, what to tell us you'd like and how to do that. Do you need any assistance with technology? Do you need access to a conference room?" So that they were able to then, when the person arrived in the space, everything was already set up for them. They had notebooks in the room, they had pens, they had the technology they needed. So there was really this sense of a true like concierge service that you would get almost from a hotel experience as a guest for their own staff. And that's really helped them as they start bringing the staff back to the office feel a lot more comfortable, because again, they're aware of all of the needs and the requirements that there is being asked of them as an individual before they arrive. Mm-hmm. So there's really, you kind of lost that fear of the unknown at that point, because you know exactly what's expected of you when you arrive, or who to reach out to if for some reason something comes up throughout the day. Right.
And there's a question from Nelson Furukita. Do you have clients that allow employees to decide whether they would return to the office or choose to stay home for let's say, until the vaccine or something like that?
Sure. So we've seen a wide variety, actually, depending on the company. So I can speak to Nelson, for example. None of our offices have reopened yet. Our offices closed at the beginning of March, and we are not going to be going back to the office until January 1st at the earliest. So at this moment, our employees are only going to the office if they need something specifically, if they need to have access to our library, or they need to get a box to ship something, and they have to request that ahead of time. We have seen quite a few companies, as people start to go back, giving people choice as to how frequently they come back. So I will say I do a lot of work with law firms. And one thing that law firms weren't really doing prior to the pandemic was working from home. That was one industry where they were pretty much in the office every single day, all day, for extended hours. And this kind of forced them to figure out how to work from home very quickly. And we're actually seeing a lot of those clients come back and say, people are actually very happy. They're seeing the positives of being able to work from home. They don't have the long commutes. They can take their kids to baseball practice and still get their work accomplished. So we do think going forward, a lot of companies are going to be giving employees that choice, and it will be more dependent on the job function that they do versus in the past where it was focused on either how long you've been with the company or what your title was at the company.
Cool.
Yeah, and this is a change in the mindset of the leaders, right? I think HR must be very connected with that and change the mindset for the leaders, because the old-fashioned leaders, most of the time, looks like to see the people working in front of them, right? So if you really have this kind of a new approach for the employees, HR must be connected with the leaders and change the mindset to say, hey, this is some people don't like the new normal, but this is the new way to work, let's say that. And the leaders must be prepared, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that ties in actually really well to the next section. This idea of the needs around people's mental health and well-being and how much more heightened this will be since this pandemic. We were seeing long before the pandemic, this idea of designing for the individual and creating a human experience when you come into a space. But especially now when you have people coming back with this heightened anxiety of returning, you can see in the statistics here on the side, half of the people we surveyed said they were excited about returning to the office, but almost the exact same percentage of people said they were also anxious and nervous about returning to the office. So we've got this balancing act that we have to kind of walk the fine line between, knowing that people want to come back as quickly as they can, but they're also afraid. So how do we not just, rush at bringing everyone back, but do it the right way? So I want to point out to Renato's point about some people need to see people working all the time. We have to understand that there are 5 generations in the workforce right now, and they all work and think a little bit differently. And over and above the generations, just every individual is a little bit different. And I think for so long in the design industry, and I would say designers are partly to blame for this as well, we were designing for the masses and not focusing on what certain individuals need to be able to thrive in their space. One thing over and above generations is 1 in 8 people are on the neurodiversity spectrum. And that includes everything from people who are on an autism spectrum to people with Tourette's, people who are depressed, people who have ADHD. All of those things are considered neurodiverse. And if 1 in 8 people falls in that, only 50% of those people actually know that they do. So all of us on this call have probably at least one person in our office that thinks and feels and reacts to things a little bit differently than what we would consider kind of the norm. And the fact that right now a lot of our office spaces kind of are all painted with one color, and all of the small little phone rooms are outfitted the same way, doesn't really acknowledge the fact that each person kind of learns and absorbs information differently. Some people need a quiet place where they can close the door and dim the light to be able to focus. And some people actually need to be out in an open area where they're seeing the buzz of other people, they can hear people chatting to feel more comfortable. So we really need to design for each individual. And that really comes into the idea of providing choice and variety in space. So I just want to make sure if you get anything out of this presentation, I hope it's that the biggest mistake we can make going back would be to just assume that as long as we make the majority happy, we're going to be okay. Because over and above, every person coming back has some level of anxiety, and some people are dealing with other things over and above that anxiety that we might not know about. So if we can create spaces within our office where people feel like they can go and work and be their most productive, it's only going to help your company in the end.
Right. And do you think that, and 2 points here, and I totally agree with your comment. Can we assume that we are changing a little bit from, let's say, an activity-based office to a more like individual behavior, like an activity behavior kind of workplace? So we need to understand, because let's say myself, I'm home since March, as you are, living, let's say, I'm in a lockdown right now. My personal lockdown, I always say. And I know that I'll be a completely different person once I step back to my regular, let's say, standard routine, going to clients, talk to people. So do you think that these new behaviors that we might, let's say, have will actually be our baseline to redesign everything that we designed before or during the pandemic and in the future?
So I think we're all focused so much, and this presentation is as well, a little bit on the things that we can't control and what we can do to try to kind of spin it positively. So what I want to do is kind of challenge us all to, as horrible as this pandemic is, and how many people it's affected worldwide, if the best we can, try to focus on the positive things it has brought. And I think this gives our industry an opportunity to kind of do a hard reset, and really take a step back and go, okay, what we were doing wasn't necessarily wrong. You're always told to kind of look at the big picture and do the thing that's going to help the majority. And I don't think by doing that up to this point, we've been wrong in that. However, I do think kind of being able to take a step back and kind of observe over the past few months and go, okay, how could we potentially make this even better than what it was before? And I think that's where we can say, we still need things that, are kind of cookie cutter. We can't say every room is a different size and a different shape and things like that. But within, let's say, an 8-foot by 10-foot phone room, and you have 10 of those, could the aesthetics within those rooms be a little bit different so that we can accommodate people who, someone wants to come in a room, like I said, and maybe dim the lights down or turn them completely off. So give them that control. Maybe in the next room, there's a really vibrant patterned wall covering for those people that kind of need that energy around them to keep them going. I also think of myself too, in that there are just some days where I show up and it doesn't matter how many cups of coffee or tea that I have, I'm just not feeling motivated. And maybe if I had a separate space to go to that could kind of bring that energy out in me. And some days I do just need to kind of shut the world out. So I think designing for the individual doesn't mean we're not addressing the masses. I think that's the one thing we have missed in the past, is that we assumed designing for the masses covered everybody, where if we start designing for an individual and what that individual needs, you're automatically going to include everyone. So really inclusive design but not only physically inclusive, but also including people's emotional state of mind as well. So the next section talks a little bit about flexibility. And the big point here to note is that I think most of us can agree, I know I can, in the last 15 years of my career, flexibility was something that was a nice to have, but we're now at a point where most employees and people are seeing this as a must-have. It's no longer something that is considered an amenity. It's something that's they view as requirement in order for them to be able to work best. So the other thing I want to point out is, at least from the design side in our industry, prior to the pandemic, every time we had discussions with clients about flexibility, we always were talking about physical flexibility. Can I move this table over to that side of the room? If this wall opens up, can it become, a giant room that's used for something else? And I'm not saying that that type of flexibility is not important. It definitely is, and we're going to talk about that. But the flexibility we're specifically talking about here that people are expecting going forward also has to do with their own personal schedules. And we talked a little bit about this, but people are they've now understood that they can work from home and be productive. And even if they feel like they were more productive in the office and they want to go back, the vast majority of people are still saying they want a flexible schedule in the future. Very few people are saying they want to go back full-time going forward. So how do we address that as we move into the future? And we're seeing this in a variety of different ways, and we're just starting to see this in the US. So I think it'll be interesting to watch over the next 6 months kind of how this takes shape. But we're already starting to hear companies talk about, instead of having large central hubs in urban environments, starting to have satellite offices in smaller neighborhoods or in suburban areas. So there are offices in a closer proximity to their staff members, instead of making them take those 30, 40 minute, an hour long commute to get downtown using public transit. Can they give them a closer space to go in the event that they want to collaborate or meet with a client? We're also starting to see a really interesting connection between the workplace, the co-working space, and hotels. There's been kind of this interesting trifecta happening over the past couple of years that's really actually been strengthened due to COVID. We have a client who works in the co-working space that, when COVID happened, actually partnered with a hotel brand when their clients weren't feeling comfortable coming and working in this large open co-working space. They gave them the opportunity to go utilize a hotel room for the day, so they could still break away from their house, get away from the barking dog or the screaming kids or the spouse that's talking really loud in the room next to them, but still be able to kind of focus and not have to go all the way into the office and potentially, have to deal with public transit or bump into someone else who might be in the office that day. So I think we need to think a little bit bigger as we go forward, that when it comes to focused work, people can really do that anywhere. And I think we've all discovered that. Now, whether or not you feel more comfortable working from the office or from home, that's your choice. But I think we can all acknowledge that there is some validity to having flexibility of where and when you do that focused work versus going into the office and having that now become more of a place where you go for those things like collaborative meetings, celebrations, things like that.
And to keep the company culture, I think, right, Kristin? I think this is the focus on the office space, because nowadays, very clear, that we have an options, and the big companies will provide options to work. Like I can work from home or a co-working location on a satellite office or a big headquarter. But I think it's more to, the office space will be much more to keep the culture and the things that the technology cannot allow us, like a face-to-face meeting sometimes it's very important. It's priceless when you do a negotiation.
Yeah.
So I think it would be very important. Very nice.
I completely agree. And that's a perfect segue. So thank you very much. The last section talks about what we're seeing in most of the data coming back across all generations, actually. Everyone's saying the one thing that they're missing the most is connection to their fellow employees. So no matter how nervous people are about going back, the one thing that's bringing them back, or that will be bringing them back to the office, and this includes people who were working from home before the pandemic, they're also saying, when I have a choice to go in, and we ask them what takes you in that specific day, it's always this idea of connection. So how do we really utilize the office space to enhance that connection between people? And you're kind of seeing that in the data here too. When we ask people what brings you into the office, it's always, I want to connect with someone, I'm meeting with clients, or I just need a break from my house. So now that we've kind of all determined that we can work and do our focused work everywhere, where does that leave the office space? I think we can all agree that, prior to COVID, money was king. People were trying to reduce square footage sizes in order to, be more cost effective and efficient in their office space. That's not going to change. But now that we have the ability to kind of work from anywhere for that focused work, how can we utilize the square footage that we still have to our best capability? And I think instead of just saying everyone works from home all the time, Renato brought up a great point. The culture of your space depends so much on your people. Without your people, you don't have a company culture. So how do you continue that culture when you have some people remote and some people in the office, or they're missing each other and they're not all in the office all at the same time? So what we're starting to see slowly happen with office space, and we saw this actually just about a month before COVID hit really hard in the US, we had a client say, let's reduce square footage by 50%. Instead of just saying, these people get offices, these people are working from home, everything's unassigned. So at any day, any time, anyone can choose to come in. There's going to be an app that they can access on their phone to choose where they'd like to sit in the office. They can check it out by the hour. They can check it out by the day. And when they come in, the main part of the office was saved for those shared spaces. So where you would collaborate, the conference rooms, the small phone rooms, the areas that you don't have at home, the more amenities. So things like podcast rooms or webinar rooms that have appropriate acoustics and lighting to be able to do webinars and podcasts from. Those are the types of things that are bringing people in. So really making those the focus of the office space to help create it more of a destination. So people want to come in. And so you have that space to entertain your staff and your clients without taking more square footage. You can still utilize the same footprint you were utilizing before or less, just by giving more space back to those shared elements and less to the personal focused elements, because we have now realized that a lot of people can do the focused work almost anywhere. So really utilizing the office more as a social hub.
So do you think that we're gonna see a lot of designers or being invited to come by companies to re-signify their let's say headquarters, and maybe create through these for example the satellite offices that you mentioned, create a spread that culture? And as we talked the other day, is there anything related to, as we see something, and we talk a lot about the relationship of the companies with the community that surrounds their headquarters, for example. do you think that even with these satellite offices, do you think that companies will try to spread their why, their purpose through the community, through these satellite offices, to their employees, where they live, and to the people that where they are putting those offices, right?
Mm-hmm. I think that's a great point, because I do think that's also something we can take out of this. You know, people are thinking right now a little selfishly, right? When things like this happen, we kind of all go internally and go, what's best for me? But if we start thinking bigger picture and get away from that, you know, maybe the more selfish reasons are the reasons we're starting to consider things like satellite offices, making it more convenient for our own staff. But if we think on a bigger level, what your point is wonderful. What is that going to mean, not only to the communities that you're in, but what could that bring back to you as a company? If all of a sudden you had, you know, one central hub in one location, and maybe the people in the community in a 5-block radius knew who you were and what you were about. Now all of a sudden you have these arms all over that can reach out and create that connection to understand the community that you're in. And so the community understands who you are. I think an initially maybe selfish decision of this is more convenient for our staff could in turn, when you focus on that outreach to the community, bring you back something that you might not have expected. And I think that's going to become so important right now, specifically with what's going on in the United States. But I don't think it's invaluable for anybody else. I think the more connection we can make to the people that, as designers, we are designing for, and for your companies, the people that you are serving, the better we all are at our jobs, and the better the community is as a whole.
Do you think the companies are going to increase product specification standards for their post-COVID offices? So we have a different standards in order to promote better experience to their employees. This comes from Roberto De Donato, is a company called ATEC, one of our sponsors. And I think it's a great question. Do you think the companies start to change the specifications on the office spaces, or this will be like will be the same? I don't think that we'll come back to the same, because this change everyone. But what do you think about that, Kristin?
Sure. So I think it's going to take some time. I think all of us are in a situation right now where all of our companies have had to cut back in one way or another. Some of us have had to lay off staff, have had to take other financial cuts. So I don't see everyone going to kind of replacing all of their furniture and all of their product immediately, just purely based on financial reasons. However, I do think one thing that's come out of this is we've all realized how important adaptability is, both in the physical space as well as how adaptable our companies are when something like this happens. So I do think as companies slowly start to look at relocating, purchasing new products, there's going to be a much more heightened focus on how many different ways can that work? How can that be adaptable? Okay, that setup works in a private office. What if all of a sudden I don't need any private offices again? How can I still use those same pieces in another way without having to purchase additional things to add to it? I actually had a great discussion with a company this morning about something that they're testing out, a new product that they might come out with. And it was all based around that. How can the individual kind of move and change their space based on what they want to do that day? And then over and above that, how can the company themselves, without having to call someone in, change it if all of a sudden they needed, you know, a couple small private spaces versus a bunch of workstations? So I do think there will be a much more heightened focus on that when people start looking at purchasing new furniture, but I do think we're going to have a little bit of a delay. I don't think everyone's just going to jump in and start purchasing new things now just because of the hesitation with the economy.
So, and I'm back. Sorry, guys.
We're so glad you're back.
Yeah, my satellite was missing. Now I'm back. I changed satellites and now I'm back on business. So there's this, from what you were saying, there's this thing, this what we can call like a hackable kind of multitask furniture or spaces where you can do that. Do you think companies can, not just this company or that company, or in all the industries, they might start thinking about prototyping that or prototyping different solutions before choosing the direction? Because right now we're completely lost in terms of everybody's saying something different, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm. I'm so glad you asked that. I actually had this discussion earlier today with some of my colleagues. We were specifically talking about the furniture process and how just over the last 2 months, every single client of ours that is in the furniture section of their project process is now requesting mock-ups or, like you're saying, prototypes. And that's something that over the past few years, we were actually seeing go on the decline. And I do think this heightened sense of the unknown and can it adapt and change with me, instead of everything just kind of being that idea of disposable. When it doesn't work for me, I'll just get rid of it and get something new. I do think that prototyping is going to become very popular. We've had a few projects recently where companies have said, take this entire location of ours and take into consideration everything you've learned over the past few months with COVID and redo this entire office in whatever way you think it's going to function the best for us. And we're just going to test it out and see how it works. So I do think we are going to start seeing that more frequently, especially as people start adding those little pop-up satellite offices. They start slowly like leasing back space. Like, okay, we have 3 floors, but maybe we're going to sublease the 3rd floor and just keep floor 1 and 2 before they sublease. Maybe we can use some of that space to test out a few things before they jump in and kind of buy all new.
Yeah, great.
And I don't, Renato, I don't know if we asked another question from Nelson about the coffee areas.
Yeah, I just talking about the question from Roberto.
Okay. Cool.
So we have one from David Sanchez and from Nelson. I think both work in the same company. They have a lot of questions. I think they must to hire you. Nelson, you're kidding me, guys. There's a lot of questions. Some questions you must to hire someone to help you. Like they have a site with 1,000 people. How could we identify the reason why many of the people, 51%, I think, are anxious about health and safety upon return? To me, it's very clear that until we have the vaccine, nobody wants to come back to the office. Most of the people say, hey, I don't want to be the first one to come back, but I don't want to be the least one, right? And how you believe is the best way to address this kind of concern? You know, they have a small cafe area, and the people in the past often go to cafe area, you know, to grab a coffee and chat. Here in Brazil, the coffee area in some companies are a little different. The people go there to speak, not to work. So I had other examples in some companies like that I work that did a huge coffee area, and the people go there and just grab the coffee, talk a lot of things about soccer, life, and everything. And after that, come back to sit in the work seat. So the cafe area was very empty. Sometimes happen is the culture, you know, like in Colombia, the people really sit in the coffee area and work. I think in USA, most of the company that I visited was pretty much the same. But how to deal with that? You know, people nowadays, the common area looks like a danger area, right?
It does. Yeah. So I want to be clear with everyone that the changes that you need to make your staff feel more comfortable, for the most part, granted it's different for every company, but you really don't need to demo a bunch of walls or put tape up all over everything. There are small changes that don't require a lot of cost that can make a huge difference. Like we said, signage so people know where to walk and where to head, where to wash their hands. Noting which desks can and cannot be used to give more space between people so they feel more comfortable. I'm glad you asked about things like cafes, because we actually, I'm working on a project right now where the client, their move-in date is in 2 weeks. And we designed a massive 2,000 square foot cafe for their staff. And the first thing they said when we were halfway through construction and we all realized to what level this pandemic was, do we stop? Do we not build this cafe? And what we told them was kind of what we just talked about. The thing people are missing the most is that connection. They want to get back together in groups and they want to meet. We're seeing it all over the US. People are meeting up in groups when they're not supposed to be, just because they miss that so much. So I would not tell you to get rid of your large cafes. Try to make smaller changes, utilizing furniture to be able to separate people a little bit further away from each other. Maybe this is a time to put in just a couple smaller coffee stops throughout your space, so you don't have everyone gathering together in one location because that's the only spot to get coffee. Maybe you could have 3 or 4 spread out throughout the space, so you only have a couple people waiting for coffee. But there are a few different things you can do. But once this is past us and there is a vaccine, and people have kind of moved beyond this initial phase, the one thing that's going to bring them back are all of those great collaborative spaces where they can get together. So if you get rid of it, you're not really going to have that exciting thing for them to come back to.
Yeah, great. Love it, Kristin. Like we are talking about the 5 generations here. And nowadays, I think the next 5 years for workplace, real estate facilities will be very different than the last 50 years, right? Also to the real estate guys like myself, that we have a long lease terms. And now we must be much more flexible and everything. And I told you that I'm from another generation, the Flintstones one, or the Jetsons generation, because I watched the Jetson cartoon.
I did too.
But I love the youngest thing. Like I use the technology most I can to work from home, because I think to me it's more comfortable, because I really need to focus space sometimes and be more quiet to work. Of course, and this pandemic was almost impossible with kids and dog and wife and a lot of things to do surrounding us, and very difficult to be focused. And I try to use the technology to be like that. But do you think that the main challenge from the future for the designers will be have a open space, but not too open? Have less technology, but more technology, because we need to be more concentrated. It's sometimes this kind of open space for some generations works well, for others not well. And most of the offices are provided, or the designer who are thinking about the millennials. And we have more than millennials there. So how the design can solve that? Because it looks like a very difficult puzzle, right, Kristin?
It is, yes. You're exactly right. There are currently 5 generations in the workforce. And to your point, I don't disagree with you at all. We've kind of focused on the majority, which right now is the millennials. They're the largest group in the workforce. But if you add up the other 4 generations that are there, they are much higher in total than the millennials. So to ignore those other 4 generations is doing our companies a disservice. I think the biggest thing we've seen is that's kind of had an aha moment for us is different generations are having a different reaction to this current situation. For example, a lot of people just tend to say anyone 30 years and younger is a millennial. And that's not the case at all. We have Gen Z, and they are very much different than the millennial group. Gen Z grew up with technology. They're very comfortable sitting in a room by themselves, being given a task, getting it done, and not having contact with anyone else. The millennial group as a whole craves constant interaction with other people. They want to collaborate. They don't feel they're most productive unless they're collaborating with other people. So the one thing I do want to make really clear, that over and above people's like emotional needs, there are also generational needs. And there are people, boomers and the traditionalists, who had this idea and this association with their office meant that they achieved something. And if they are just removed from an office, they're going to have, some sort of feeling associated with that in a negative way. So rather than just kind of lumping everyone into an open office environment because that's how millennials work best, and saying, this is what we're doing and this is the solution for everyone because they're the majority, I really want us to kind of step back and go, okay, yes, they are the majority, but there are so many other people who work a different way. And for example, in the years, the age ranges that they give, I technically am a millennial, but I don't associate with any of the general statistics you hear about millennials. So if you're to just lump me in with the rest of that group, that's not how I function best. So I do think one of the advantages to having office space that is completely unassigned, it gives people 100% comfortable ability to choose where and when they work without a stigma of, I left my desk to go into a room, and someone automatically thinks either, they're texting someone, they're not getting work done, or they don't want to collaborate with us. They're alone, or they don't want to work with us. If everything's unassigned and people are constantly choosing when and where they work, you've kind of lost that stigma of, Kristin's not sitting at her desk, so she's not getting anything done, because it's more the norm that people are constantly moving and changing their environment. And it also gives people, no matter how they work best, whether it's a generational difference, an emotional difference, a physical difference, gives them the opportunity to make a choice on what's best for them.
Yeah, great.
And that's just the beginning, right? Because
it is.
With the advances of medicine and medical procedures and the healthy life and everything, the 5 generations that we see right now, maybe from 20, 30 years from now, we're going to be 6, 7, we don't know. And like we said, like we talked, I don't know when I'm going to retire. I don't see that future. And even people older than me from another generation, I'm a Generation X, and the baby boomers, the generation before me, most of them, and we had a case in the past, an advertising company owner, he left and he started as an intern at Google at age 72. So
yes,
I'm a baby boomer with a millennial kind of thinking, right? So I'm lost in time and space. So people will start thinking about it, and I don't know, that's one thing that we need to consider in the future, right?
Great point. Yeah, there are a lot of people staying in the workforce longer or leaving and returning back into the workforce in either the same industry or in a completely different one. So it's a great point. We can't, just emphasizes again that it's that one size fits all just does not work.
Yeah. Totally agree.
Yeah, great. So Kristin, thank you so much. It was amazing to have you here in Brazil for some minutes. Luis, thank you for the support on this webinar. If you guys would like
both so much.
Yeah, if you guys would like to have more material, learn more, you can follow nelsonworldwide.com. I think is the website, right, Kristin? And if you guys would like to have a contact with Kristin or something like that, any question, just let me know that I can put you guys in contact. Was very good. And this presentation will be soon in our YouTube and you guys can revise these and see any other items that we can cover here. We can send the questions to Kristin and try to answer them as soon as possible. But I think we answer most of the questions. Most of the questions come from Nelson. Nelson from Tetra Pak must to hide.
And you can feel free to share my email address.
Yeah,
so if
sure.
anyone has questions, if you do, feel free to email me. As long as it's in English, I'll be able to respond.
Yeah.
My Portuguese is very minimal.
No, we'll be great. So thank you so much, Kristin. Thank you, Luis.
Thank you.
And see you guys next week in our next webinar. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, guys. Stay safe. Bye.